Well, good morning, everyone. Anyway, I'll start with the whole idea of potentially an idea being thrown about us playing. I think we're hearing a lot of things go around right now. I think the main responsibility is the safety of everyone first and foremost. I think the idea of playing games seems very exciting. I think there's nothing more I want to do right now than run out and just resume my schedule as things were normal. But most importantly, I think safety for everybody is the most important thing, not just for us, because, if we do and go play games somewhere, there's going to be people that need to be there, such as officials, crew members, you guys as well. So I think, the idea of playing is very good. I think we all are keen and very eager to start back on track. And I think just some of the concerns are just making sure everybody can be safe. And then after that, I think we can be able to move forward from there. Question on pay cut. I think that's another thing that's been going around. And I think from my perspective, it's going to be very different to other people's. And, I understand the idea around it. I think there's nobody that would want a pay cut. But I think to move forward, these negotiations would have to be potentially made. And, I'm willing to go any way around it. I'm not being stubborn. I'm not being, within my own ways. I understand the perspective, and I'm also looking at the way other leagues around the world are handling this situation and just trying to gain as much perspective from that because, like I said, ultimately the main focus is being safe, and then hopefully, if you see how the Bundesliga is about to start, if things move in the right direction, hopefully we'll be able to get a green light in terms of playing back competitively.
Thanks. And that was Anton Walks from Atlanta United talking about the team's return to individual training. And welcome to another edition of the Sports Inquirer Show. This is Emar Sopertut. Hope all of you are well out there in the world. We are hunkered down here in Metro Atlanta, Georgia, trying to hold things down here, make sure everything is right. Personally, I am still at home, absorbing the quarantine endeavors, but I have to admit I have been to the gym and I've been to the supermarket. I have to be honest, but I also been to the park and trying to get my workouts there and just get my mind right, make sure everything is cool. But in today's show, we're going to go over Anton's comments and everything else in the world of sports, starting with the verbal submission. We're going to recap UFC Fight Night 176. We're going to talk about Atlanta United and the other professional soccer leagues in the original Free Kick. Stagger Screen. I'll give my final thoughts on the Last Dance documentary on the Chicago Bulls. And I will go into what I'm watching on Netflix. Darn it, we got to get that topic in before anything else. I've been teasing it for weeks, it seems like. But I'll talk about what I've been watching on there. But as always, when I follow everything that we're doing, as always, go to the mothership, the sportsinquirer.net. Premier site for news and notes in the world of sports. You can also head to Facebook under Sports Inquirer and the Sports Inquirer. We have 2 pages on there, which are very helpful and useful to go to. We also have our Twitter and Instagram pages. That's under the word Sports Inquirer. That's all one word. So when you do a search on there, just do Sports Inquirer and you will see everything going on there. Also, subscribe to us on YouTube and SoundCloud. Go to either one of those pages and you can subscribe to our podcast and our other audio and video endeavors on there. And just do search under the words The Sports Inquirer. You do that, you can like us, subscribe to us, and check out everything that we're doing, and we would greatly appreciate it. But as always, the best way to do everything, just go to sportsinquirer.net. That's the best way to do it, to find everything that we are doing. Well, locally here in Atlanta, we'll start off just talking about the overall scope of the coronavirus and its continued impact on sports. That's how we've been starting our past few Sports Inquirer shows. But there is some news here in Atlanta, and we're going to talk about Anton and his thoughts. But we're starting to see some states open up here in the United States. Obviously, Georgia has allowed some individual workouts, such as Atlanta United and things like that. States like New York and California are slowly allowing the opportunity to have the potential of Major League Baseball stadiums opening up to allow games in for spring training endeavors, so they can start training and get ready for things like that. So that's exciting and intriguing. But that's where we're at right now. We're starting to see states open up. Florida, we discussed it before in our previous shows about them allowing professional wrestling and mixed martial arts to take place in the state. So that is something that has been of interest. But as I said, I think when you start seeing the states open up, as wherever you're listening to our show, I'm sure you're starting to see some things open up as far as restaurants, gymnasiums, the haircuts, or your barber, beautician, things along those lines. Once that starts happening, now you're going to start seeing some of the professional sports have their facilities open up, at least under stringent conditions, and allow for training to take place and maybe the eventual start of regular seasons. We start to see some sports actually have regular seasons take place, and we'll break those down throughout our show. But I think that's what we've seen go on there. But as far as here in Atlanta, Atlanta United has started their individual training. As you heard Anton Walks talking about, they are back on the field with very controlled conditions, allowing for workouts to take place. And in essence, what they do is they have a player on the field, they do their drills, and there's only one player at a time, I believe, on the field. Anton kind of broke it down. So what we're starting to see right now is that taking place. I think eventually in Major League Soccer, you may see the teams head down to Orlando, Florida, whether it's I think the Walt Disney Complex has a lot of soccer fields. They actually train there in the preseason anyway. A decent amount of teams go down there, so they're familiar with the Orlando, Florida area. And I think what you may end up seeing happen is them have training camp for a few weeks as groups, as teams, once the individual workouts are done. And then you might see some matches take place down there until the facilities open up as far as the arenas. And that may happen, I think, in July or August. But they may want to get some regular season games that count down in Florida. And the good part about that as well is that while we have the individual workouts in Georgia and a few other states, there are some teams that are unable to do it. New York is unable to do it. The Canadian teams have not had the individual workouts like Atlanta, so there is a competitive disadvantage, which there always is in some form. That's just the reality of sports, but you want to limit that as much as you can. So I think what you can end up seeing is these teams head down there to Florida, train for a month, gets a few games in, and then, Lord willing, if all this relatively clears up, you start having games in the arenas in July or August. I don't think you're going to see, just looking at other leagues and the way these teams are operating, you will not see fans in the facilities. You may not even see media there, which is disappointing because we like going to the games to cover them. But I think what you're going to end up seeing is you'll have the teams, the coaches, and maybe a few cameras, so that you still broadcast team, probably the home broadcast team, and then if your team's on the road, you get the road broadcast, so you can have that simulcast with your local broadcast. If it's a national game, whether it's on FS1 or ESPN, things like that, NBC, you get the idea. I don't think you'll have the traveling road team have their broadcast teams. It will be very minimal as far as the teams go, as far as their traveling squad. But we're seeing some of that starting to take place overall. We have seen live soccer, though. The Bundesliga just had their first matches in close to 70 days take place this past weekend. It was what it expected. You saw empty arenas. And the thing about the German Soccer League, all their stadiums, as far as numbers go, they may have the capacity, maybe the largest capacity in all of professional soccer. You just look at their stadiums and the sizes. I mean, even the smallest stadiums look like they hold 20, 30,000, which is a good amount. But you saw some games taking place in Berlin, and Borussia Dortmund held a game or a match. Really, in essence, you saw what you saw. It was empty stands. The games took place a little rusty, which is expected. The guys haven't played in a few months. But the soccer looked pretty decent. They'll get better. It'll get better over time, of course. When goals were scored, you saw the guys celebrating together. I don't think you can avoid that. And we'll get to Major League Baseball in a minute as well, as far as what they're trying to do, as far as limiting interaction. In soccer, you're going to have tackles. You're going to have guys standing next to each other for corners and free kicks, things like that. If a goal is scored, you're going to have teammates come next to each other. My whole thing is that when Major League Baseball, we'll talk about it now, why not? It's a free-flowing show. When you look at their standards and what they're trying to do, as far as limiting guys in the dugout 6 feet apart, limiting the interaction with the ball, and using different balls for seems like every other pitch in that sense. And then even when teams travel on the road, they're not allowed to pretty much leave the hotel. They're quarantined within their hotel. They can't take their individual cab or taxi to the stadium. They have to ride on a bus. I think once these guys are tested, if you're going to test them and say that they pass and they can travel or they can play on the field or whatever, you have to have interaction. You're going to have to take a chance and let these guys touch each other and play. That's just the way sports are. It's contact sports. You're just going to have to allow it. You either have to do that or not have the sports at all. And that was a good thing, seeing the Bundesliga have their matches take place. You can hear the guys talking on the pitch. I didn't mind that at all. Obviously, you want the crowd there. You want excitement. But if this is what we have to do, this is what we have to do. So I think that it was a good start, at least seeing soccer take place on the field and that taking place. What also took place this past weekend was the UFC Fight Night 176, and this is the verbal submission portion of our show where we discuss combat sports. They held the fights. They had 3 fights really in 1 week, and held under the fight conditions due to coronavirus. The fighters and the staff was tested beforehand, and all throughout the week. And we talked about the pay-per-view the previous week with Jacare him testing positive for the virus after the weigh-in and ultimately going home. And so we went over all of that stuff. But we still had fights take place, and it was a pretty solid fight card. Alistair Overeem was defeated Walt Harris by a second-round TKO. He's still a heavyweight contender. You look at that division, outside of Stipe, who else would you consider a major contender in that heavyweight division? You have Daniel Cormier. We don't know if he's retired or not. He's recovered. He just lost the belt. We don't know where he's at right now overall. But Alistair Overeem and Walt Harris got he got some punches in and knocked down Overeem during the fight. But overall, Overeem was able to recover and gain the win overall. I think certain sports, when you look at it, like mixed martial arts, you really don't need a crowd there. I don't mind that. I mean, obviously, you want to have the atmosphere of a crowd, an event, and a lot of things going on. But if you're going to operate under these conditions, it's not the worst thing in the world. You're able to hear the ambiance of the cornermen. You hear what they're saying, which is interesting. It's a sport that you can, unlike professional wrestling, and we talked about this, like WWE, where they have all the lights and all the glitz and glamour. You can see the emptiness of it. With the UFC, at least the way they've presented it, is not as bad. So you can actually focus on the fighters themselves and not the empty stands and empty arena. But I thought that it was a very well done presentation overall of what we saw. So that's continuing to go on. As I've stated before, right now I don't think anyone came out of the fights positive for the virus. That's your biggest concern, that you tested before, and if someone tests positive, they leave the atmosphere, they leave the arena, and you take care of that. But now that everyone has fought and been in the same arena, does the virus transfer over more? And unfortunately, it's probably going to happen. Just like all of these matches that took place in Germany, it's going to happen at some point where a guy tests positive, has to be quarantined, and then you worry about if he passed it along to other people, whether it's the coaching staff, the support staff for the respective teams, the officials, things like that. So that's where you have to check out everything there and you worry about it. And also NASCAR had an event take place this past weekend. They held a race in Darlington, similar to mixed martial arts. While the crowd being there would be useful and helpful, you can carry off an auto race without having a crowd there. It's been done before. We've seen it several times when there is a delay in the race due to weather. If they're supposed to hold a race on a Sunday and it's canceled because of weather and they have it on Monday, there are not many people in the stands, that's okay. And auto racing, I think, is more conducive to watching it on television anyway. I mean, you want to be at the, if you're really into cars, you want to be at the track and hear it and see the setups and all that. But it carries off very well on television. So I think that was a positive sign that the event took place there. And it was golf as well. And I guess Rory McIlroy and Dustin Johnson had a skins game. I think golf's another sport that works very well with a minimal crowd. The guys can keep their distance. You can see them being respectful of the space. It's an open atmosphere, open air, which is what's encouraged by everyone as far as getting your physical conditioning in. You're encouraged to go to walk around in your neighborhood and do things like that. And golf, that's pretty much what you do. You hit a ball and you walk. So it really helps in that regard. I did like seeing the guys in shorts. I think that they've loosened up the rules as far as professional golf goes, or they've been trying to for a while now, to let guys wear shorts. I think that was a cool little twist to it as far as that goes. But I didn't watch too much of the skins game. I watched a hole or two. I kind of like more of the tournament format instead of a skins game. So that didn't really appeal to me too much. But I thought that it was very solid seeing that take place and seeing that event go on. As far as the Stagger Screen portion of our show where we discussed the professional basketball, we'll start with the NBA and what they're trying to do. Similar to all the other professional sports, I think some of the teams have started to have individual workouts in that regard, which is interesting. But overall, we're still in this place where you have to figure if they don't get started by mid-June, you're probably not going to see basketball until the 2021 season. And while that's disappointing, I think that's where you're starting to see more of that lean. They've been, just the logistics of it make it very, very difficult to get these seasons resumed, especially when you look at soccer or you look at basketball and hockey that still have to get their playoffs in. See, the good part about baseball is that their season hasn't started yet. So whether it starts, they're going to probably start it in July, or they can start it June 15th or wherever day they come up with. It's the start of the year. You play your 80 to 100 games. That's probably going to be the number. And then you go from there. Basketball, they've already played the majority of the regular season. They have to get a full playoffs in. So it's just a different, tougher scenario. So we'll see what happens there. But as far as the Last Dance documentary, I thought it was very well done. We've discussed it before. Just having the access to the video of the Bulls during that last championship year in 1998 is very impressive. And just seeing all those guys in action. Seeing the Indiana series replayed was very intriguing. I remember watching that in 98, going into the series, and even watching throughout and saying Indiana is the better team. Obviously, you have Michael Jordan, who's one of the greatest players of all time. But besides that, you looked at the team, Rodman and Pippen, as far as the Bulls side, Rodman and Pippen, were they breaking down? Were they kind of getting older? They had Kukoc, who had a very good series against Indiana. But you looked at the Pacers, Reggie Miller was a solid player. Rick Smits inside, the Davis brothers, Dale and Antonio, Mark Jackson, Chris Mullin, veterans, Hall of Famers there. Jalen Rose, a solid contributor as well. You looked at that squad and you figured, man, they could give the Bulls problems, and they did. And they laid out that entire series very well throughout. And as I remember Game 7 and the Pacers leading in the fourth quarter and saying, man, this might be it for the Bulls. But Chicago found a way to win that. And then you go to the Utah series and just the struggles with that. I always figured that something else was going on with Michael Jordan in the quote-unquote flu game. Because a guy with the flu doesn't act the way he was. We've all had food poisoning at some point in our lives, just a bad virus, and he was acting more like that. You see the sweats, the throwing up, just things like that. You just want to curl up in a ball in your bed and not do anything. But the fact he played 40 plus minutes, put up 30 plus points, it was just a tremendous effort by him. And just once after they won that final series in a '98, just seeing the guys in the bus, and then Jordan in his hotel room with the media playing the piano and all that stuff, I thought it was very well done. And the final thing, as far as that final 2 episodes, breaking up of the Bulls dynasty, I blame that on Reinsdorf. Krause has been an enemy throughout the documentary, just his antics, his attitude. Hall of Fame general manager, did a great job building the team, but obviously his personality was not very people friendly. Phil Jackson, I think, is his kind of this Zen Buddhism, passive aggressive approach to things can be grating in a way. He was done with that team, by the way. I think he looked at it from, they were talking about, let's go Phil back for one more year. No, he was done after '98. He already had his eyes on the Lakers. He was going to take a year off, go to his ranch in Montana, relax, and then go coach Shaq and Kobe to 5 more championships. He had that in mind. He knew what time it was. So I thought once he was done, and Jordan, and that's what Jordan was talking about as well. He said he would come back and play one more year and try to bring everybody back on 1-year contracts. That wasn't happening. You had Scottie Pippen. He signed his best contract with the Rockets. Well, it was a sign and trade. So he went to the Rockets. Luke Longley, he signed a big deal with Phoenix. Steve Kerr, he signed with San Antonio for a big deal. When I say big deal, relative to what they were making before. Then you look at Dennis Rodman. He was on his last legs in his career. So they squeezed out everything you can really out of that squad. So Jordan coming back and saying that they could come back for 1-year contracts, where I blame, I'll say not blame, but where I question Reinsdorf is that when you said at the beginning of the year that everyone's coming back 1 more year and it's time to rebuild, and you have Jerry Krause telling Phil Jackson, you can go 82-0, you're not coming back for another season. When you have that attitude going into the '98 year and you put out The Last Dance and all of that stuff, you can't retroactively go back after winning the 6th championship of that Last Dance year and say you want to bring everybody back together. That's not going to work. That doesn't fly. So I thought what Reinsdorf saying, they want to bring Phil back, bring everyone back together, and then Jordan saying, yeah, I'll come back for 1 year. No. Where you messed up is that before the year, all those guys knew, hey, this is our last year together, and now we're going to get paid, whether it's with Chicago or somewhere else, because all those guys were under 1-year contracts. So I thought that approach, they messed it up from the very beginning. When you have, and I liked how they ended the documentary, where they listed kind of where everyone went, and then the team began its rebuild, and the Bulls are still rebuilding 20 plus years later, because they have not even reached the NBA Finals since then. I know they've had some blimps or moments with the Derrick Rose and Jimmy Butler and Joakim Noah. You know, they've had some teams, I think they've had made the Eastern Conference Finals at least once. I know Miami beat them 1 year in the conference finals, maybe even twice, but they've not even reached close to the level of the Michael Jordan years because they were so quick for the rebuild. That rebuild was going to happen no matter what. You need to ride that thing until the wheels fall off and get as many championships as you can. And that's where they messed up with that last year from the very beginning. So I thought they did a very good job with that. But the documentary, you got so many anecdotes, and maybe go down the list of them in a future episode of our show. But you got all of the breakdowns of, we got Reggie Miller talking, John Stockton talking about the finals. I put on Twitter, and I was half serious, that may be the biggest accomplishment of the entire show, getting John Stockton to sit down and talk about the NBA Finals. You notice Karl Malone didn't talk so during the documentary, and I'm sure they reached out to him. But to get John Stockton, who is very reclusive, he doesn't talk to media often, to actually sit down and talk about the finals, that was impressive. You saw Michael Jordan with his security staff, particularly Gus, who had a security, very personal relationship. he had with Gus. I thought that was a nice anecdote. Steve Kerr about the assassination of his father while he was in Beirut as a university president. I knew the information about it and the details of it, but a lot of people weren't familiar with it. So I thought they did that, presented very well and very respectful, and how it tied in a way to that final season, and it also with Michael Jordan's father being killed in a very brutal way. So they had that. Kerr and Jordan had that connection. They had a connection on paper, on the court, and kind of off the court. So there was some synergy there. So I thought the documentary did a very good job of tying all that stuff together in the final 2 episodes. And I'm gonna watch it again at some point. It's very easy viewing. I knew about 80% of the stuff that went on. What I didn't know about was the backstage things of that final year. Particularly, I talk about Jordan and security staff, and Gus. All the basketball stuff I knew for the most part because I lived through it. I was fortunate to watch Jordan really from '88 to his retirement and acknowledge it and remember it. So I knew about all the Pistons stuff, him playing on the Dream Team. Now, there's things I did not know about Pippen's family background and why he signed that long-term contract that had him undervalued for the majority of his tenure with the Bulls. I didn't know about his family situation in Arkansas and his disabled family members. That was interesting. Jordan with his broken foot, the second year of his career, and his distrust in management, how that started. That was very intriguing as well. So you got some anecdotes there, but it was very easy viewing. You see him. I don't want to go into the LeBron now has to prove that he's the greatest of all time because Jordan had this documentary about him. We pretty much watched for a whole month, pretty much a Jordan documentary, his ups and downs on and off the court. It's going to prove, a lot of people's going to be like, okay, Jordan was the greatest of all time. LeBron is terrible. And then you have the LeBron defenders who are like, oh, this propaganda of the Bulls and Michael Jordan. LeBron is awesome. He's the best. They're both awesome players, awesome transcendent talents on and off the court. Let both of them live in their own realms. And look, I know that we're in a time where sports topics are minimal because we don't have much to talk about, which in a way ties into things like the NFL with the amendment of the Rooney Rule and that getting full attention and that whole situation, which I have thoughts about. I'll hold them off till later on. We'll talk about that after I finish my Stagger Screen portion of the show about the NBA. But where I don't understand how LeBron ties into all of this stuff. There's obvious inevitable comparisons because those guys are shortlist all-time NBA greats. One is retired and Jordan and has such a cultural on and off the court impact on the sports world. And then LeBron has reached some of those heights and is still playing. I've always said, and I'll finalize this on the LeBron and Jordan stuff that continues to come up. Jordan's retired. We have a lot of time to look. We've had close to 20 years, at least from his Bulls run. He came back with the Wizards and all that stuff. So we've had a good 10, 15 years to look back on Jordan's career, acknowledge it, and appreciate it. You have to do the same thing with LeBron James. He's in the middle of his career right now. What if he wins two more titles with the Lakers? Does that change things? It may or may not. Maybe he has some bad playoff moments. Does that change it? May or may not. Let the man finish his career. We can have a year or two of distance, and then we can talk about it. Do I think Jordan's a better player? Yes, I do. Does that mean LeBron is bad? Of course not. LeBron's right there and I don't like doing the greatest of all times because it's so tough. You have different eras. Was George Mikan an all-time great? Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, Oscar Robertson. You go down the list of all these guys. How can you, Wilt Chamberlain, Kobe Bryant. Some guys want to say he's the greatest of all time. Shaquille O'Neal, Tim Duncan. But it's hard to compare basketball. Different eras, different ways, styles, and ways guys played. You look at the game now, the three-point line has had such an impact. I looked at those score lines from those Bulls games, and if you got to 90 to 95 points, you won the game. And we saw games 85, 84, You know, that was high scoring. It was just a different type of game, a lot more inside play, a lot more mid range game, slower pace. Now games in the 110, 120s because the pace is faster, more 3-point shots, things along those lines. So how do you compare different guys from different eras? It's very, very hard to do that. But I don't like the fact that this documentary on Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls is some way diminishing LeBron James and his greatness as a player. I don't see the connection at all. Let both of those guys live in their own realms, in their own specters, and you go from there. All right, and I'll bring it to the NFL and the Rooney Rule and all that stuff. Look, my thoughts on that is you have to be very careful of telling organizations how to operate. And that's where and the Rooney Rule is now going to possibly expand to give draft pick compensation for the hiring of minority head coaches and general managers. I do like the amendment of having assistant coaches speak during the playoffs. I think it's an antiquated rule, so that may help to cause a little bit more. But I own a team. I want to operate the way I want to operate. Don't tell me who to hire, who not to hire. That's the way it goes. Don't tell me who to interview, who not to interview. Should it be more minorities and high-profile positions such as head coach and general manager? Probably. I agree with that. But I also know that if I own the business, don't tell me what to do with my business. And that's where the Rooney Rule comes into play and messes that up. So I don't like this amendment, the amendment as far as that goes. And then finally, what I've been watching on Netflix, Tiger King was very tremendous. We saw all of that going on. I will say this, it did show me, and I'm not an animal advocate as far as majorly, but I do like to watch the nature shows, and I do like going to the zoo and going to the botanical gardens or aquariums, things like that. It has made me look at captive animals in a different perspective and just seeing their potential cruel treatment of it. So that really intrigued me. I watched ZZ Top documentary, really cool on those guys, the three of them together. I enjoyed that. I watched Umbrella Academy, the first season. Ups and downs. I got through it. I bared through it. But whatever. On My Block, I did like that show. 3 seasons. Teenage drama about kids growing up in Los Angeles. Not necessarily my realm, but I thought it was kind of cool. Something different for me. There are only so many nature documentaries you can watch on Netflix and crime shows. Ozark's 3rd season went very well. I really enjoyed that. The Big Show. I only watch it because honestly the Big Show's on there.